All right, it is 11 o'clock. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. People will be filtering in, and unfortunately, that's going to distract me a little bit due to recent changes in Zoom software. It's kind of unavoidable at this point. We will be addressing that for future webinars. So just real quick, hi there. My name is Quentin Russell. I am the content marketing specialist here at Doc365. And today we're going to be presenting the next part of our SharePoint Basics series. Today we're going to be talking about user and group management. So this is going to include both a practical demonstration of things you can do within SharePoint to manage your groups, manage permissions and everything. And in addition, we'll be covering just some basic high-level things that you can do to improve how you manage users, things to think about, and that sort of thing. However, with that said, kind of going over more in depth on what today's presentation is going to be. So first of all, we're going to talk about the basic principles of user and group management. So basically things to think about, things to keep in mind, things to consider, that sort of thing. After that, we're going to, even though it's split up into two things on here, it's essentially one larger clump where we're going to be talking about the specifics of user and group management. So showing you things that you can do within there, the basics of that, managing permissions, managing groups, how it works, what you can do, that sort of thing. So with that said, because the thing is that, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, basic user management is easy. Basic group management can be easy, but beyond that, managing permissions, managing everything within an organization, if you're not keeping everything in mind, if you're not paying attention to that, if you're not keeping track of everything, it can easily get lost and things can get messed up pretty quickly. And finally, at the end of the webinar, we will be doing a question and answer session where I will attempt to answer any questions you may have, either related to the topic of today's conversation or just SharePoint in general. If I can't answer your question, I will do my best to email you a response after the fact. That way I can make sure that you're getting the most out of this webinar possible. So with that said, really quick, I'm going to cover who Doc is. So we're Doc365. We're a company located in Jacksonville, Florida. We have over 17 years of experience working with SharePoint to deliver exceptional productivity solutions. We work with a wide range of companies in different industries to implement a wide array of SharePoint productivity tools. This includes project management, contract management, vendor management, board meeting management, and more. We work with companies such as, we work with several United Ways, several YMCAs. We work with King's Hawaiian to both deliver their intranet and other solutions. And we work with a wide array of like banks, credit unions, construction companies, legal firms, software companies, that sort of thing. We help make sure that they can do what they need to do and they don't have to worry about maintaining their SharePoint or trying to keep track of everything. We just make it simple, easy, effective, which goes into our mission. Our vision is to break down silos and get stronger employee engagement all across your organization. What that sort of means. So the thing is that employee engagement has sadly been dipping over the last couple of decades. A recent Gallup poll found that only about 33 to 35% of US employees are engaged in the workplace, which is not great. That's only 1/3 of the average workforce in the United States, and that can vary depending on the organization. So, and unfortunately, an engaged employee isn't going to be doing the work effectively. They're not going to be doing it as well. They're not going to be paying attention. It's not going to be, they're not as effective as they could be if they were actually engaged with your organization. Well, part of that is we believe that our productivity tools, specifically our contract management system, our intranet, that they are effective tools for building that engagement and bringing people back in. And the reason we're able to do that, the reason we're able to really drive that engagement is that we build everything we have on SharePoint, specifically Office 365 as a whole, and utilizing all of that to because everyone's familiar with Office 365, everyone's familiar with Microsoft Word, Excel, all of that. Those have been staples of the business world forever. And so by building our tools on that, they're easy to use and they're proven to drive engagement and get employees to work smarter and harder. However, you're not really here for a Doc 365 sales pitch. You're here to talk about user and group management. So when it comes to user management, well, first of all, what is a user? That's pretty simple. It's anyone who uses SharePoint, Office 365, that sort of thing. Pretty simple. It's anyone within your organization. Generally, they can, depending on what permissions they have, they can edit documents, create documents, approve documents, create lists, send those out. Higher tier people within your organization can manage groups. They can add people to groups, assign permissions, delete users, that sort of thing. Now, when it comes to actually managing your users and keeping track of them and everything, there are 5 principles, 5 key things that you need to keep in mind. The first thing is your user profiles, your user permissions, user training, user feedback, and then user reporting. These are the 5 most important things that you need to be thinking about when talking about when you're working with your users within SharePoint. So what do I mean? Well, first of all, user profiles. So Delve offers user, if you're using Office 365 and SharePoint Online specifically, you should have access to Delve, which allows users to build and create profiles that let people know all about them. They can be pretty in-depth, actually, kind of being like a miniature LinkedIn profile almost. So, you have, except a little more personalized and a little less everyone trying to sell you something, because you're all within the same organization, but it kind of gives you that same level of professional overview of someone. So when you are building your profiles within Delve, they need to be as complete as possible. And by that, I mean, everyone's education should probably be on there, what they do, who they report to, what their skills are, what projects they've worked on, what like major projects they've worked on, what they're currently working on, that sort of thing. Essentially, you're trying to let it helps users get a grasp of each other, who they are, what they're doing. And additionally, by a lot of this is self-reporting. So while admins can add this information themselves, it's better to have your employees, have your users fill out these profiles themselves. That way it gives them that sort of sense of ownership, which can help with that engagement. And the thing is, having engagement, having ownership with your SharePoint environment, and specifically if you're using an intranet, can be, well, it's vital right now when everyone's working from home, when everyone's social distancing, when everyone's not really interacting face to face. And so it's really hard to get to know each other. Like, for instance, we have a new hire we've had several new hires within Doc in the last several months. And I have never met these people in person. But I have a good sense of who they are. I know what they do. I know what their skills are. I know where their strengths are and everything. And I even know their hobbies, what they do outside of work, what they would do outside of work if it weren't for social distancing, because of their user profile. Because I've gotten to know them through that. And I was able to kind of form a more complete picture than just the IM message and the brief times that we video call each other. Which has really helped. It's made it so that instead of just being a face on the screen, a picture on a screen, they're an actual person, which is something that's kind of vital right now, because as I'm sure, you guys are all feeling it too, not being able to, actually interact with people, not being able to see each other, it's hurting morale. And so this is kind of a morale saving thing. And even when you go back to work, it's still important to have, especially as you're growing as an organization. This is a good habit to get into for scalability. So even if you're only like a 20, 25 person organization, everyone knows each other, everyone interacts with one another, You know, maybe it's not as important then, but as you grow, as you evolve, as you hire more people, as you balloon out to be a 50-person, 100-person organization, suddenly not everyone knows each other. But since you've gotten into the habit of setting up your user profiles, having people engage with those, and really work within that environment, you're not going to have to worry about that. That's not going to be as big of a concern. So moving on to user permissions. Make sure that everyone has the permissions they need right from the get-go as you're onboarding them. Determine what they're doing, what they need to have, and put them within the right groups in your organization. We'll be covering that in a bit, but essentially make sure that you know what everyone is allowed to do within your organization. And part of that is also tracking their group membership. So the thing is someone is a member of two groups. SharePoint doesn't do distinction. It doesn't really know how to distinguish between the two groups. So if someone has a higher tier of permissions on another site, and they're also as part of a group on one site, and they're part of a group on another site with a lower tier of permissions, they'll still have that higher tier of permissions because SharePoint just defaults to the higher one. So this is pretty important, making sure that everyone in your organization is doing what they're supposed to do and has access to what they're supposed to have. And nothing more than that, nothing less than that. You really don't want to have a situation where someone is constantly having to message their supervisor to say, hey, I can't read this document. Can you share this with me? Can you make sure I can access this? That's something that you definitely have to do with newer hires a lot. And it's not something you really want to be doing because that wastes time. And instead of, even if it's only like 5-10 minutes, that's 5-10 minutes every day, maybe once or maybe 2 or 3 times a day. That stacks up throughout a week, and suddenly within it, you're losing about an hour a week on that. And beyond that, per month, you're losing anywhere to 4 to even 10 hours, depending on how often that pops up. So you really want to make sure right from the get-go, everyone's permissions are where they need to be and that they have the right permissions. And if someone has special permissions for a period of time, that you go through that, whoever is responsible for managing your SharePoint environment for your company is going through and checking to make sure that if they only have that for that specific period of time, that they've removed those higher tier of permissions. Because while you don't know, you trust that your employees aren't going to do anything actively malicious, ignorance can be just as harmful as maliciousness. So someone accidentally deletes the wrong document, someone accidentally sees the wrong thing. Really, that can just cause little issues that stack up. So tracking everyone's permissions, making sure they have the right permissions is paramount. So moving on to training, this is more outside of the SharePoint environment, but everyone needs to know how to use SharePoint. While you can trust that they have that kind of basic default amount of knowledge, what with everyone being, what with it being Microsoft and Office 365 and everyone growing up using Word and Excel and PowerPoint and everything, you still want to make sure that you're providing a base level of training for your employees. Whether that's a basic orientation course, whether that's having them do ride-alongs for other people, whether that's having them read, take an online training course that you've created, basic SharePoint information, or just having them track down blogs, or you have an assortment of blogs. Make sure that they're training to use SharePoint for their position, and that they're doing it, and that it's ongoing. Because the thing is that Microsoft is constantly updating SharePoint. 5 years ago, SharePoint looked completely different. So making sure that everyone knows what they're doing and that they're able to use the latest advancements in SharePoint. This can either be regular training courses. So once a week, get everyone in a room for 30 minutes. Well, not get everyone in a room, but bring everyone into a Zoom call or a Teams conference, or whatever video chat software you use, if you're going back to the dark ages with Skype and everything. Bring them in and show them basic things that they can do within SharePoint. Show them how to do basic things that relate to their position. You know, that way they're keeping their skills sharp. And heck, you don't even have to do that. You can even just send out a supplemental training material each week. Maybe, you know, create you know, use a use a web part to add a feed to your SharePoint environment that just curates a list of SharePoint tutorial blogs, like, you know, Doc365, ShareGate, that sort of thing, to really make sure that people are reading those and getting what they need to know and learning about different things that they can do to potentially make their jobs easier. Moving on, feedback. This is pretty important. You need to be collecting feedback from your users. If people are constantly saying, you know, you've made your SharePoint environment, it's perfect, it's amazing, it's great, but it's hard to use. It's complicated. Things are hidden. People aren't able to find things. It's not actually that good of a SharePoint environment. You need to constantly be soliciting feedback from your users so that you can modify your SharePoint environment to what they're saying. Now, the thing is not everyone's feedback is going to be amazing. Not everyone's feedback is going to completely alter what your SharePoint looks like, but you still want your users to feel heard for that engagement. Because you know, acknowledge that feedback, acknowledge what they're saying, and you know, make sure that you're collecting it regularly and acting on it. Don't just collect it and then have it sit there. Even just a simple thank you, and then we're going to do this. And if enough people are saying that something is a problem, making that switch, making that change quickly within the week, that goes a long way towards improving employee confidence in what you're doing, both in IT, both in management, and it makes them feel heard, like I've been saying. You can either do a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly survey. My suggestion is to probably do a monthly smaller survey on specific features, a quarterly survey on what they're doing within their roles, distributed to whatever groups they're a part of, and then probably a yearly comprehensive survey. However, that can be a lot of work, so probably just doing a monthly and yearly survey would work best if you don't exactly have the time to come up with a, you know, new comprehensive survey all the time. Moving on to reporting, this might seem like feedback, but it's slightly different. So reporting is focusing on the data that you're gathering from SharePoint itself. You need to be tracking, you and your IT department need to be tracking what's going on in your SharePoint environment. So this includes what users are doing, when they're doing it, what they're looking for, how long they're doing what they're doing, that sort of thing, so that you can actually adjust your SharePoint to match that. Just kind of subtly make it easier for them. So when it comes time to actually, you know, make a comprehensive change to your SharePoint environment, say you're adopting a new intranet provider, say you are switching over to a new domain, whatever it is you're doing, making sure that when you're doing it, you have that data so that you can go to either your internal team or the external team that is making these changes and say, build around this, because it's a lot better to have an outline, a skeleton of what you're looking for than to just try to gather that information. Because something that we've run into a lot with our onboarding teams is that companies that don't gather this information, it definitely slows down the deployment process. You know, optimally, you could get a new SharePoint off the ground, new custom SharePoint intranet environment off the ground in about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the amount of data you have. If you don't really have any data, and say whoever is responsible for making the changes to your SharePoint is having to make educated guesses, make leaps, having to ask different wide variety of different people what they need and what they're looking for and how they are using SharePoint, it can slow that down, make it anywhere from 3, 4, even 5 weeks for deployment. So really gather that information as much as possible. So now that we've talked about the principles of user management, let's talk about group management. So this is going to definitely be a somewhat shorter section, but because there's only 4 principles of group management. It's pretty simple. Well, actually doubling back, what is a group within SharePoint? Well, it's essentially a group is kind of a title given to a group of people within SharePoint that describes what they do and what permissions they have on the site that the group is related to. So for instance, if you're a site owner, that's technically your group. It's not just a title. Even though only probably 1 or 2 people are going to be in that group, it's still technically considered a group within SharePoint. So what people do, what that and it basically it describes what they can do and it describes what permissions they have. That's pretty simple. So what are the 4 principles? Well, it's membership, visibility, permissions, and communication. So starting with membership, kind of doubling back to what we were talking about with user management, specifically the users section. So basically all members of a group gain access to the same permissions and restrictions. So check what users are part of your group. You also maybe want to determine whether people can, whether only owners can add someone to a group or whether individual users can. While it can save you time to allow any users within a group to add other people to that group, it can also lead to situations where potentially unqualified people are making changes to a group, adding people, something gets out. It might be faster, but it's not as secure, essentially. Moving on to visibility. So it determines who can see the group. Specifically, you can see whether anyone can see the group or only members of the group can see the group. Generally, this is a more minor thing, but this is something you might want to consider toggling for different groups within your organization, whether people are working on specific projects. Again, this isn't something that's going to come up a lot with smaller organizations. Generally, everyone's going to be seeing what everyone's doing. But for larger organizations where you're potentially working on more private projects, whether you're working on something that, whether people are working under an NDA, because groups with, if specifically people are working within a team site, that creates a whole new group. We'll touch more on that in a bit when we get to the practical section. But essentially, if you want to make that team site invisible to most people within the organization as you're working on something that's confidential, whether that's due to an NDA or it's a government thing, or you're just trying to keep it hush hush within the company itself, you can make that group private and maintain compliance with any contracts that you might be a part of. Moving on to permissions. Again, we talked about this earlier. Think carefully about what permissions you give a group. Everyone who is a member of that group will have the permissions assigned. There are varying tier levels of control of permissions that you can give to a group, whether that's just the ability to read whatever the team site, or if they have full control, whether they can contribute to the site, whether they can have approval power, that sort of thing. Again, consider who's a member of the group, think on that sort of thing. Finally, communication. Make sure to communicate with your users as you assign them to groups. Let them know what permissions they have, what they cannot do. This helps save time. Basically, instead of someone saying, well, hey, I don't know if I can access this document, reaching out to someone, asking questions, they can be like, okay, no, I'm a member of this group. This group can do X, Y, and Z. I know I'm allowed to do X, Y, and Z. I don't have to reach out to this person. I can just go ahead and make this change. Pretty simple, saves time, pretty important. With that said, we're going to move on to the more practical portion of this webinar. So I'm going to be going through and I'm going to be showing you, one second, new share. We're going to share this. So what you see here is you see a basic the doc test environment. So this is where we build and test a variety of different products, try out different things. This is where we show things off in webinars, that sort of thing. So really quick, I'm going to walk you through a couple things that you can do within SharePoint, simple how-tos. We're going to talk about how to add and delete users. We're going to take a look at Delve profiles. We're going to take a look at what it means to create a team site, same thing for communication site, and specifically how groups interact with those. We're going to talk about in terms of a wider site collection, how to add new groups with new permissions, how to create new site collection permissions, and finally, we're going to talk about how to assign new permissions to groups in a site collection, kind of just a broader thing. So before I continue, one thing to just basically think about is that all users are part of a group no matter what. They generally just start out as just a site member, and any other groups that they are a part of will either come as they join team sites or communication sites, and as they do more on the site, and as your administrators assign things out to them. Smaller companies don't really need to worry about this, but this is really only something that medium to larger companies should be thinking about. So first of all, we're going to talk about how to add and delete users just in general. So we're going to go to site contents. And then we're going to go to, yep, I'm in the right share. We're going to go to site settings. And then we're going to go to people and groups. So as you can see right here, this is the, this shows everyone on the site. Since this is a demo site, it's just Joe Joseph. So what we're going to do is we're going to add someone to the site real quick. So add users, just enter a name. We'll go with Alex Wilbur, marketing assistant. So you can also include a personal invitation with the message. However, you can also see their options. You can say, I want to send them that email invitation, which is the default option, or you can say you don't want to. I don't see why you wouldn't want to, but that depends on what you're looking to do in your organization. You'll also see who this is shared with. You can also make it so that you can also email everyone, and then also click there. You can actually see everyone, but that's not really relevant to what we're doing right now, all of the different groups. So add users. Let's add Alex. And he has been added. He is a member of the site. As you can see his name, and then you can also see his about me, his title, and what department he is a part of. Pretty simple, lets people know what's going on. This actually pulls from your Delve profile. So now, pretty simple to delete someone. Just click right here. Remove users, pop-up will come up. You are about to remove the following members. This will always come up every time. That way you don't ever do it by accident. Click OK. And they're gone. Pretty simple. This is something you can only do on a broader level. So only if you're an admin or if you have the powers to do so. But, pretty simple, pretty easy, So let's take a look at Delve real quick. So we'll go to all apps. And here we are on Delve. This comes with Office 365. So as you can see, here are all the people in your organization. You can see popular documents. It's kind of like I said, it's kind of like LinkedIn. So go to your profile, and here you can see a basic Delve profile. You can see your recent documents, different people that you're connected to, different documents that they're working on. You can even see all of the people who are reporting to who in the organization. Kind of a small flow chart. Again, helps people know who they are, what they're doing. There's a small title. You can add what projects they're working on. So for instance, let's go to a Delvance. So as you can see, there's an About Me section, what projects she's worked on, what her skills are, what her, what her education was. In addition, so you can actually see a full breakdown of that. You can also see what her interests and hobbies are, that sort of thing. In addition, you also get their contact information in case you want to reach out to them. So pretty simple to have employees update their Delve profile. Just go in here, update profile. You can click edit right there. You can edit the phone number. You can add a home phone, add a fax. You can tell your story. You can also add what the projects are. You can, and then you can also add what your skills are. You can also say, hey, ask me about this. These are the schools that I've gone to, and then here's what I want to do in my free time. Pretty simple, pretty easy. That's Delve. So let's go back to SharePoint. So now we're going to talk about what we're going to take a look at specifically team sites and communication sites. So let's go to create a team site real quick, if it will load for me. So we'll call this webinar 1006. The site name is available, yada, yada. And then what you can do is right here, when you create a team, it automatically creates a new group for all members of that team site. So you can right from here, say, okay, I'm going to add an additional owner. So Alex Rappaport, or I want to add a new member, and they'll have differing permissions. So we're not going to add anyone right now, but we're going to click finish. Right here, we have a fun new team site. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go into here, and we're going to want to go to site permissions. So right here, you can invite new people to the site, so you can add members to the group, or you can say you only want to share the site so that they can just view it. You can see all owners have full control. You can see the site members, what they can do. You can change from here whether they have edit control, full control, or read control, where basically they can just view the site. And then you can also add site visitors. However, with communications, no, with team sites, you generally aren't going to have site visitors. That's more for communication sites, but we'll touch on that in a bit. If you want to go to more advanced settings, just click here for advanced permission settings. So what you'll do is you can go here and just click site members. You can actually have a description of the group, that sort of thing. And then what we'll do is we'll go to actions, and we'll go to, you can actually just get rid of the group from here. And you can also do manage group settings. So you can change the name, you can change who the owner is. So you can, instead of having it just be the owners, be the owner of the group, have it be someone else within the organization. You can make it so that only group members can view it, whether you can edit who's allowed to edit membership of the group, whether people can request to join the group or request to leave the group. And you can also make it, if you do have the accept button, if you do have it where you can accept new users, whether people can request, you can also have it where it auto accepts. And then you can also, if you do have requests on, you can set it up so that the requests are sent to this new email. Also from here, you can just delete this group. So pretty simple, pretty easy. So going back to groups. Yep. So what we'll do is we'll go to, nope, this is the wrong tab. We're just going to backspace out of here. And then we're going to go back to here. And you can also create a new group from here. So say I want editors. Pretty simple. You can determine who the owner is. Again, you have that level of control that we talked about earlier. And then you can also give custom permissions to people. So, full control, design, which is where they can view, add, update, delete, approve, and customize content. Edit, where they can actually add, edit, and delete lists, and do the same thing with documents. Contribute is where they can just view, add, update, and delete list items and documents. So essentially, they don't have a ton of control, but they can contribute things to the site. Hence why it's called contribute, or just read only. If you're just trying to get someone to take a look at your work, maybe someone outside the organization, that sort of thing. So this is actually something, so instead of having it just be, do the groups created from Susan Davids, do the groups created reflect automatically as such in Teams? Yes. When you create a team site, and when you create a team site, it actually does connect to Teams. So you can actually manage all of this from within Teams itself. Yes, and in addition to that, talking from Michael, yeah, you can have it just be read. So you can just have someone be, I don't know, customer A. So create this, and then what you'll do is you'll just go and add a user to the organization who is outside of the organization. So potentially, if they're one of your customers and you're trying to present that information to them, what you can do is you can create this group where you just call them customer A, or if you're doing it specifically, or if you're just doing a customer specific role, you can give them this role, assign that group to them, and then they'd only have read permissions for that team site. However, one thing I would like to point out that it is, if you do the same, if you add that user, that external user, to another group within the organization, and they have a higher level of permissions in a separate group within your SharePoint, they will have that higher tier of permissions all throughout your site, not just within this specific team site. I don't know about no download specifically. I will, however, get back to you on that, Michael. If you could just leave your email in the chat, I will do my best to get that information to you after the webinar. Thank you. So going back to what we were talking about with the specific groups. So backing out of here, that's how you create new groups within a communications, within a team site. So then what we'll do is we'll go back to SharePoint specifically. And then what we will do is we will go to create a new site. And with this one, we'll go to a communication site. So we'll call this communication webinar. So what we have right here, finish. So with a communication site, it doesn't automatically ask you to add people to the site. Instead, it just gets you started building the site itself. As you can see right here with the hero web part and everything, that's because communication sites are more presentation focused. And they are, and so you're generally here to present a product, present a project, that sort, or the results of what you're doing. I see. And Timothy Rains, I will do my best to get that information to you after the fact. Thank you. Let me write that down. But sorry for the interruption. After this, I do request that all questions be held until the question and answer session of the webinar. We should be there in about 5-10 minutes. So for this one, again, site permissions. It's the exact same thing for a communication site. It's just that the breakdown, you're likely going to have more visitors. It's likely going to be more read-only, that sort of thing. Because that's the big distinction between a team site and a communication site. Team site is more for collaborating and people to work on, content within there, and communication sites are there to just present information. We've actually written a blog about communication sites if you'd like to check that out. It's on our blog page, A Basic Guide to Communication Sites. It's there at blog.mydoc365.com. All right, and going back to SharePoint, now we're going to take a look at just broader site permissions, site user groups within SharePoint Online. So let's get up to here. Go back to site contents. And we're going to want to go to site settings. You can just click site settings from here, but this is muscle memory for me. And you're going to want to go back to site permissions. So here you can see these are all of the permission levels within this site. Within this site collection and everything. So as you can see, doc admin has read level, team site owners have full control, site members have edit mode, have the ability to edit, translation managers have restricted interfaces for translation. This is a custom permission level. So what you want to do is you can, in order to create a new permissions level, it's easy, instead of assigning it to groups and everything, just create a new group. So go right here, if this would load. So when you're doing it at this higher level, you actually, so it's pretty much the exact same as creating a group within a team site. However, you have more permissions that you're able to assign to users. 1 second. So yeah, so as you can see, permission level group members, basically these are the permission levels that people get within the site mydoc.sharepoint.com. So as you can see, there's just varying levels that you didn't exactly have access to in these smaller levels. This controls what everyone does within the SharePoint site. Pretty simple, pretty easy. It's not too complicated. And then what you do is you can then say you did actually want to grant permissions to specific users. You can grant it to specific users, or you can grant it to groups of people. So this gives them access to content within this site, even if they're a group that's outside of the site. And then what you can do is you can then customize what permissions they have from there. Also, if you click right here, and you can also edit user permissions from here if you do want to edit permissions. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Go right here, change what you want to change, that sort of thing. Pretty simple, not too difficult. Just make sure that when you're doing it, that you're keeping track of everything, that everyone's organized, and that you're following the principles of user management and group management that we talked about earlier. With that said, we are done with this practical portion of it. So now with the Q&A session, I already kind of got into that earlier. Sorry for that. Sean asks the relationship of SharePoint permissions to Microsoft 365 AD permissions. They should be pretty similar. I don't know the specifics of that. However, I will research that and I will get back to you on that. My tentative answer is that they are the same. However, I am more specifically focused on SharePoint. But yeah, Sean, I can get back to you on that. Does anyone else have any questions? If no one else has any questions.
The last demonstration, Michael here, the last demonstration you did where you had extended access rights, I actually thought I noticed one access right where you could restrict download.
1 second, sir. Do you mind? Let me turn up my volume. You were very low there. Would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, okay. The last demonstration you did, site permissions, that was not on a user level where you create a new group, but in site settings, where you had the extended rights choices. Normally, you only have four or five choices when you create a new group, but here you had 7 or 8 choices. So
that is for higher tier site collection.
That was for, come again, sorry.
Basically, that was for the site as a whole. So yeah. Team sites are different from the overall site collection.
Okay.
So the site collection is essentially so the highest tier site collection and everything is your basic domain. For us, it's mydoc.sharepoint.com. And then when you create a team site, it is essentially mydoc.sharepoint.com / whatever the name of that team site is.
Okay. So you can't change that on the team site level. You have to change that for the complete SharePoint site, or what?
Yes, for the broader options. And the thing is that if you give someone, like I said earlier, if you give someone permissions on the broader level, if you give them permissions on the site collection level, as opposed to the team site level. So for instance, if they're within a team site and they have the ability to, they have edit permit and they only have read permissions on there, but they have edit permissions throughout the whole site collection, it will default to them having edit permissions on the site collection.
Okay.
So Sean asked, I understand that some companies are using SharePoint to assign site user groups to Microsoft 365 Active Directory security groups so that users only need to be assigned the proper AD security group, and by default that propagates down to SharePoint. When does this make sense versus not make sense? I would say it depends on your comfortability with Active Directory versus SharePoint. Me specifically, my primary focus is within SharePoint, so I've not really touched on that. So I'm specifically focusing on user management within SharePoint. However, Sean, I would love to do some research on that and get back to you on that. In addition, if anyone else is interested in that information, I would love to provide that information to you. So 1 second. And then, so let's see, we'll go with, so Sean. And then Lisa Crane. Yep, so all of you who, actually, yeah, Maria, that is a great idea. I will actually send the answer to that to the whole group alongside the webinar follow-up email. So when you guys get, later today, I will be sending out the recording of this webinar, both to people who were unable to attend and to anyone who wants to go back over it. During that alongside that, I will send the answer to both of the to all 3 questions that have been asked. I will sum up the question that I already answered, and then the other 2 questions that I was asked. So if anyone else has any questions, then I think that we're good to be done here. If you have any more questions about SharePoint in general, about what we do here at Doc365, that sort of thing, feel free to reach out to us. You can schedule a free demo with Doc365. Either go to one of our product pages and fill out the demo form, or email us at info@mydoc365.com, or feel free to call us at 904-309-9970. We'd love to have a conversation with you, go more in depth about this, potentially host a free demo. It's just 30 minutes, won't take up too much of your time. There's no obligation. So yeah, we'd love to hear more from you. If that's everything, I think that's everything. So this has been Quentin Russell with MyDoc365. Thank you all for coming out, and I hope you all have a great day.